2 days after burying my mother, my husband Cameron asked me for a divorce so he could get the $2 million she left behind. But Dorothy Fletcher had already predicted this and created a legal trap that left him with nothing. My name is Hannah Brooks, and I'm going to tell you how my mother protected me from beyond the grave and how the man I loved for 15 years showed me exactly who he was on the worst day of my life. It was 2010, and I had just graduated from the College of Charleston with a degree in elementary education. I was at a corporate networking event downtown when I met Cameron Reed. He was 20, worked in tech sales, and had that smile that seemed to light up the entire room. He was charming, confident, attentive in ways I'd never experienced. He wore a sharp suit, spoke about his ambitious career plans, and when he looked at me, I felt like I was the only person in the world. Cameron won me over completely in those first months. He'd show up at my school with flowers, take me to romantic dinners overlooking Charleston Harbor, and he was perfectly charming when he met my mother, Dorothy. Everyone called her Miss Dot. She smiled, served her famous pecan pie, and asked polite questions. But I noticed something in her eyes when she looked at Cameron. A subtle hesitation, a pause I couldn't quite interpret. 6 months later, Cameron proposed at Folly Beach during sunset. I said yes without thinking twice. I was 18, in love, and believed in fairy tales. The night before our wedding, my mother held my hands and asked, "Baby, are you sure? You're very young. There's no rush?" I laughed and said I was absolutely certain that Cameron was perfect, that we were building something beautiful. The first year seemed good. We lived in a small apartment in West Ashley. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. I taught 3rd grade and loved it. Cameron worked in sales, always talking about the next promotion, the next big opportunity. We had simple dinners, watched movies, made plans. I thought we were building a life together, brick by brick. But looking back with the painful clarity that only betrayal can bring, I can see the signs I ignored. Cameron had this strange obsession with money and status. It wasn't about comfort, it was about having more than others, about being seen as successful. He'd drive through south of Broad, where historic mansions cost millions, and become obsessed. "One day we're going to live here, Hannah," he'd say, his eyes shining with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. "One day we're going to get our slice of the pie." 5 years into marriage, things changed. Cameron became colder, more distant. He started making comments about my teacher's salary, about how it wasn't enough. "You ever thought about doing something else?" he'd ask. "Teaching doesn't pay the bills, Hannah. We need to think bigger." I'd try to explain that I loved teaching, that we were fine. But he'd roll his eyes, as if I were naive, as if I didn't understand the real world. He also started making strange comments about my mother. Miss Dot had worked as a nurse at MUSC for 35 years, lived modestly, saved every penny. She'd bought her house in West Ashley in the 80s and paid it off completely. Cameron knew this and began asking questions. "Your mom must have good savings, right? She worked so long." Or, "You think your mom made investments? She must have something put away." I hated these conversations. It felt wrong to discuss my mother's finances, as if we were waiting for her to die. But I ignored the signs because I loved Cameron. Or at least I loved the idea of him, the memory of who he'd been. I'd been raised by my mother to be loyal, committed, to make marriage work no matter what. My father, William Fletcher, had died when I was 7, and my mother raised me alone, working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. She taught me you don't give up on people you love, that you fight, that you persevere. So that's what I did. Life continued in this strange pattern for years. Cameron grew increasingly obsessed with money. I kept teaching and trying to keep our household running. We visited my mother every Sunday for dinner. She'd make shrimp and grits, pecan pie, sweet tea in tall glasses. Her house always smelled like magnolias and something baking in the oven. Cameron was polite during visits, but I could see his impatience, the way he'd check his watch, how he wanted to be anywhere else. My mother observed everything. She always had this ability to see through people, to understand what was happening beneath the surface. Sometimes after dinner, she'd pull me into the kitchen and ask quietly, "Are you happy, baby?" "Really happy." And I'd always lie. Always say yes, that everything was fine, that Cameron was just stressed with work. She'd squeeze my hand and say nothing, but her eyes said everything. She knew. She always knew. Then, 3 months before my mother died, everything changed. It was July 2022, a hot, humid Charleston day. My mother called and asked me to come over. Her voice sounded different, to controlled, to calm. When I arrived, I found my best friend Eli already there. She worked as a nurse at the same hospital where my mother had spent decades. They were sitting in the living room, and I knew immediately something was terribly wrong. Miss Dot had gone to the doctor for back pain and weight loss. The tests came back. Pancreatic cancer stage 4. 6 months to live, maybe less. The world stopped. I couldn't process the words. My mother, my rock, my only real family, was dying. She held my hands with that quiet strength she'd always had and said, "I need you to be strong now, Hannah. Stronger than ever. We have things to take care of, you and I." The next 4 months were the hardest but also the most precious of my life. I took leave from work to care for my mother full-time. Cameron didn't like it. "You're neglecting our marriage, Hannah," he complained. "I need you at home." But for the first time in our marriage, I put my foot down. My mother needed me, and I was going to be there. Those months with Miss Dot were a gift disguised as goodbye. We talked about everything: childhood memories, stories about my father, her regrets, her dreams. One night, about 2 weeks before she passed, she held my hand and said, "Baby, I need you to promise me some things. Promise me you'll be strong. Promise me you'll stand up for yourself, no matter what. Promise me you won't let anyone make you feel small or unworthy." I didn't understand why she was being so intense. I promised anyway. Then she said something that haunted me, "And baby, promise me you'll trust Attorney Howard Green. He's been my lawyer for 20 years and he's a good man. When the time comes, you listen to him." She squeezed my hand. "Some people show who they really are when they think they have something to gain. Watch for that, baby. Watch for it." Miss Dot passed away on a Tuesday morning in October. I was holding her hand, Eli was beside us, and Reverend Thomas from First Presbyterian was reading Psalms softly. Cameron was at work. He said he couldn't miss any more time, that he had an important presentation. My mother took her last breath at 9:23, with morning sun streaming through the window. I whispered "I love you" until the tears choked me completely. The funeral was beautiful. The church was packed. My mother had touched so many lives. The choir sang Amazing Grace, her favorite. People shared stories about how Miss Dot had helped them over the years. I cried through the entire service, and Cameron sat next to me, holding my hand, looking like the supportive husband. But I could feel his impatience, the way he checked his watch. That night, I returned to our apartment, exhausted, still wearing my black dress. The house was empty. Cameron had gone to the office. I stood in the dark living room, surrounded by sympathy cards and casseroles from neighbors, feeling a loneliness so deep it physically hurt. Cameron came home after midnight, smelling like beer and cologne. He sat on the edge of the bed. "Hannah, we need to talk," he said, his voice strangely controlled. My heart started racing. There was something in his tone, something cold and calculated. "About what?" I asked, my voice hoarse from crying. He took a deep breath, and for a split second, I saw something in his face that scared me, something cold, predatory, selfish. "About us," he finally said. "I've been thinking about this for a long time. We've grown apart. You became obsessed with taking care of your mother and I don't think this is working anymore." The words took a moment to register. I sat up in bed, looking at him in the dim light. "What are you saying?" My voice came out as a whisper. He couldn't look me in the eyes. "I'm saying I think we need to separate. Maybe file for divorce." My mother had been buried less than 24 hours ago. And my husband of 15 years was asking for a divorce. "Cameron," I said, my voice shaking, "my mother died yesterday. We buried her today. And you want to talk about divorce now?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were hard, without remorse. "I know the timing isn't ideal, but I've been holding this in for months. I can't keep pretending. We need to be honest with each other." Something inside me broke. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "Get out." I screamed, my voice tearing through my throat. "Get out of this room and get out of my sight now." He stood up slowly, and I saw that cold look again, that calculation behind his eyes. "Fine. But we're going to have to deal with this eventually, Hannah. And you should probably talk to a lawyer too." He left the room, and I heard the front door close minutes later. I collapsed on the bed, sobbing so violently I thought I might be sick. Eli arrived an hour later. I'd called her in a panic. She found me on the bedroom floor, still in my black dress, tears and makeup smeared everywhere. "He left me," I kept repeating. "My mother is gone and he left me too." Cameron came back the next morning with a manila folder. 2 days. 2 days since we buried my mother. He put the folder on the kitchen table. "What's that?" I asked, my voice flat. "Divorce papers," he said calmly, as if discussing the weather. "I already filed. You just need to sign. My lawyer said if we do this amicably, it'll be quick and clean." We can split everything 50-50. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He leaned forward, hands on the table, looking directly into my eyes. And Hannah, you should know that I talked to a lawyer about your mother's inheritance. If she left you anything, it's technically marital property since we're still married. So you might want to think about signing those papers sooner rather than later. The longer you drag this out, the more complicated it gets. And there it was. The real reason. It wasn't about our marriage being dead. It was about money. It was about my mother's inheritance. He was counting on it, planning for it, and now he was making his move while I was at my most vulnerable and devastated, just 2 days after I laid my mother in the ground. After Cameron left with his divorce papers, I sat at that kitchen table for hours, staring at the manila folder as if it might explode. My mind was spinning, trying to process what had just happened. 15 years of marriage, and he was leaving me 2 days after burying my mother because he wanted money. It wasn't about lost love or incompatibility. It was about inheritance. It was about him thinking he was going to get rich off the death of the woman who'd welcomed him into her home every Sunday for 15 years. I picked up my phone with trembling hands and called the only place that made sense, Howard Green's office. The secretary answered with that professional Southern warmth. "Mr. Green's office, how may I help you?" I could barely speak. "My name is Hannah Brooks. My mother was Dorothy Fletcher. She passed away this week and told me to call Murdoch Green." There was a brief pause, then the secretary's voice softened. "Oh, dear Hannah. Green was expecting your call. He can see you tomorrow at 10. That caught me off guard. He was expecting my call? How did he know? But I agreed and hung up, more confused than ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and went to my mother's house. I needed to be near her to feel her presence. The house was dark and silent, still smelling of magnolias and her Chanel No. 5 perfume. I sat in her favorite green velvet armchair where she used to read. Her reading glasses were still on the side table, marking a page in a book she'd never finish. I picked them up carefully and started crying again. "Mama," I whispered to the empty room, "I don't know what to do. Please help me. I need you." The silence was deafening, but somehow, sitting in that room full of her memories, I felt a spark of something that wasn't just pain. It was determination. The next morning, I dressed carefully in the navy blue suit my mother had given me on my 30th birthday. "Every woman needs a power suit," she'd said, adjusting the lapels. "For life's important moments." I didn't know it then, but she was preparing me for this exact moment. Howard Green's office was in the historic district, in a beautiful brick building with iron balconies. The brass plaque read Green and Associates, family law since 1983. Howard Green was exactly as I remembered, a distinguished black man in his late 60s, gray hair, kind but incredibly intelligent eyes. He stood when I entered, came around his antique desk, and gave me a tight hug. "Hannah, my dear, I'm so sorry about your mother. Dorothy Fletcher was an extraordinary woman." His words broke something in me, and I started crying right there. He gave me tissues, poured water, and waited patiently. Then he sat behind his desk and said, "I know you're going through a difficult time, so I'll make this straightforward. Your mother came to see me 6 months ago to update her will and set up some trusts." 6 months ago. But she'd only been diagnosed 3 months ago. My confusion must have shown. "Dorothy was always careful about planning ahead," Howard continued. "She wanted everything in order just in case." He opened a thick folder. "Now I need to ask you something. Has Cameron mentioned the inheritance?" My stomach dropped. "Yes," I whispered. "He asked for a divorce 2 days after the funeral. And said he consulted a lawyer, that it would be marital property." Howard nodded slowly, something like sadness and anger crossing his face. "Your mother predicted he would. In fact, she was so sure that she took very specific steps to protect you." He slid a document across the desk. "Hannah, your mother left you everything. The house, worth about $400,000. Savings accounts totaling to $130,000. Life insurance of $500,000. And investment accounts around $600,000. I stared in shock. "That's almost $1 million. Howard nodded. $1,730,000, to be exact. Your mother was brilliant with money. She invested wisely, lived below her means, and built this wealth over 40 years. My mind was racing. Cameron knew. He must have suspected my mother had savings, but almost $2 million. That explained everything, the rush, the timing, the papers already prepared. "But Cameron said it would be marital property," I said, my voice shaking. Howard leaned forward, and I saw a small smile. "That's what your husband thinks. But your mother made sure that wouldn't happen." He pulled out another document. Dorothy established an inheritance protection trust. Every single penny she left you is in that trust. According to the terms she specified, that money is yours and yours alone. It can never be considered marital property. It can never be touched in a divorce. It's protected under South Carolina law. He tapped a thick stack of legal documents. I've been practicing family law for 42 years, and I've never lost a case involving an inheritance trust. Not once. This trust is impenetrable. Tears streamed down my face, but this time they weren't just sadness. It was gratitude, amazement, love for a woman who protected me even after she was gone. She knew, I whispered. She knew he would do this. Howard nodded slowly. Dorothy never said anything directly negative about Cameron to me. But about a year ago, she came in asking about protecting inheritance from divorce. She said she had a feeling. Just a feeling. And she wanted to make sure that if anything happened to her, you'd be taken care of no matter what. He pulled out an envelope with my name in my mother's handwriting. Dorothy instructed me to give you this after I explained the trust. She said you'd understand everything once you read it. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a 2-page letter in my mother's careful script. My dearest Hannah, it began. If you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I'm assuming Cameron has shown his true colors. Baby, I'm so sorry you had to find out this way, but I need you to know something. I saw the change in him years ago. I saw how he looked at money, how he talked about wealth, how he seemed more interested in what you could give him than who you are. I never said anything because I hoped I was wrong. But a mother knows, baby. A mother always knows. The letter continued, I spent the last year making sure every penny I worked for would go to you, and only you. Not because I'm trying to control you from beyond the grave, but because I want you to have freedom. Freedom to leave if you need to. Freedom to start over if you want to. Freedom to build the life you deserve. The money in that trust is yours. Use it wisely. And baby, please don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting yourself. You are strong. You are smart. You deserve real love, not the kind that comes with conditions and calculations. Hold your head high, baby girl. I'm always with you. All my love, Mama. I read through sobs that shook my entire body. I carefully folded the letter and held it against my chest, feeling as if my mother were there with me, her arms around me, protecting me one more time. Howard gave me time to process, then said gently, there's one more thing. Dorothy left instructions that if Cameron filed for divorce in the first year after her passing, I was to immediately help you with your divorce proceedings. She even set aside $50,000 specifically for your legal fees. Your mother thought of absolutely everything. I looked at this man my mother trusted to execute her final plan. For the first time since she died, I felt something other than pain and despair. I felt hope. So what do we do now? I asked, my voice firmer. Howard leaned back, and that small smile returned. Now we let Cameron think he's winning. We let him think you're going to sign those papers and split everything with him. And when he gets comfortable, when he thinks he's about to get his hands on $1 million, that's when we show him exactly what Dorothy Fletcher did to protect her daughter. I left Howard's office with clear instructions. Act normal. Let Cameron think I was considering signing, document everything. But maintaining that facade while my world crumbled inside was the hardest thing I'd ever done. I drove home slowly, my mind spinning between my mother's letter, the trust, and the devastating reality that the man I'd shared 15 years with had never truly loved me. Cameron was home when I arrived, sitting on the couch watching TV as if nothing had happened. Hey, he said casually. Did you think about the papers? I took a deep breath, remembering Howard's words, let him think he's winning. I talked to a lawyer today, I said, keeping my voice shaky. His eyes immediately lit up. Yeah. What did he say? The greed in his voice was nauseating. He said we should probably proceed with the divorce. That fighting it would just make things expensive and complicated. I forced the words out. I saw relief pass across his face, barely disguised satisfaction. That's mature of you, Hannah. That's really mature. I know this is hard, but it's the right thing. The right thing. This man had the audacity to talk about what was right. The lawyer also told me about my mother's estate. I continued, watching his reaction. It's more than I thought. A lot more. How much more? He leaned forward, trying to sound casual but failing. Close to $2 million, I said quietly. I watched his whole body language change. His eyes widened. His breathing quickened. And for just a second, he couldn't hide the pure joy on his face. Wow, he finally said, trying to sound sympathetic. Your mom did well for herself. That's good, baby. That's really good. At least something positive came out of all this, baby. He was calling me baby again. Yeah, I said quietly. The lawyer said it'll take a few weeks to process. Probate and all that. Of course. These things take time. He moved closer on the couch. I want you to know that even though we're getting divorced, I still care about you. We can still be civil. We can still be fair. That word again. I should probably move back in, he continued. Just until we sort everything out. It doesn't make sense for me to pay for a hotel when we're both adults. Every part of me wanted to scream at him to get out. But I remembered Howard's words. Document everything. Okay, I said. You can stay in the guest room. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched Cameron transform. Or maybe I was finally seeing who he'd always been. He asked about the inheritance constantly. When would the money be available? What accounts was it in? Had I thought about how we'd split it? He even suggested selling my mother's house immediately while the market was hot. My mother's house, where I grew up, where she took her last breath, and he wanted to sell it like just another asset. Alai came over almost every day. She could see what was happening and it made her furious. Girl, I don't know how you're staying so calm, she said one afternoon in my mother's kitchen. I'm not calm, I told her. I'm just waiting. Waiting for what? I wanted to tell her about the trust, but Howard had advised keeping it quiet. Just waiting for the right time. That Sunday, I went to First Presbyterian for the first time since the funeral. I needed that connection with my mother, with the community she loved. Reverend Thomas saw me and his face lit up with concern and affection. When the choir sang Amazing Grace, I cried silently. Sister Louise took my hand and squeezed it, saying nothing, just being present. After the service, several members offered support. Sister Louise invited me to dinner. Brother Frank offered help with my mother's house. Sister Evelyn just hugged me and whispered, "Stay strong, baby. God's got you." When I got home, Cameron was on his phone, laughing loudly. I heard him say something about hitting the jackpot before he noticed me and quickly ended the call. Who was that? I asked. Just my brother. Nothing important. He stretched. Listen, I've been thinking. Once the money comes through, maybe we should each get our own lawyers. No offense to yours, but I think we both need independent representation. Translation, he wanted to make sure he got every penny he thought he was entitled to. That night, I called Howard from my car. He's already got a divorce lawyer. Someone who specializes in high-asset divorces. Good, Howard said calmly. Let him spend his money on fancy lawyers. It won't matter. The trust is ironclad, Hannah. When do we tell him? Soon. I'm waiting for one more thing. Your mother instructed me to wait until Cameron made a specific demand. She said he'd eventually ask you to give him money before the divorce was final. She said when he did that, that's when we'd know for sure who he really was. 3 days later, I was at my mother's house when Cameron called. Hannah, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come home? I don't want to do this over the phone. I drove home with dread. When I walked in, he was at the kitchen table with papers spread out, looking excited. Sit down, he said. I sat, hands clenched. So, remember that investment opportunity I mentioned? With Derek? I nodded slowly. Well, the window is closing. He needs commitments by Friday or the offer disappears. He leaned forward, eyes shining with fervor. I need $100,000 to get in on the deal. My heart raced. There it was. The moment my mother had predicted. $100,000, I repeated, keeping my voice calm. Cameron, we're getting divorced. Why are you telling me this? He took my hand across the table. Because technically we're still married. And technically, your mother's money is still marital property until the divorce is finalized. So I was thinking, what if you gave me $100,000 now, like an advance on my share? Then when we split everything, we adjust the numbers. Makes sense, right? And if this investment pays off, that's more money for both of us. It's in your best interest too, Hannah. In my best interest. This man really thought I was stupid enough to give him $100,000. Can I think about it? I asked, forcing uncertainty into my voice. Sure, he said, squeezing my hand. But Derek needs an answer by Friday. This opportunity won't last forever. When he let go, I went to the bedroom, locked the door, grabbed my phone, and called Howard. He asked for the money, I said as soon as he answered. Exactly like she said he would. $100,000 for some investment scheme. There was a pause, then I heard something in Howard's voice that sounded like a smile. Then it's time. It's time to show him what Dorothy did. We scheduled the meeting for Monday. Me, Cameron, Howard, and Cameron's expensive divorce lawyer. Wear your power suit, Howard told me. And Hannah, your mother would be very proud of you. When I hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the tears fall. But these tears were different. They weren't just sadness now. They were anger, determination, the beginning of something that felt dangerously close to justice. The weekend before Monday's meeting was the longest of my life. Cameron was more animated than ever, making plans, talking about his future with those $100,000 he was sure I'd give him. "Have you thought about it?" he'd ask every few hours, trying to sound casual but failing completely. "Derek is waiting for my answer, Hannah. I really don't want to miss this opportunity." I kept saying I was still thinking, that it was a lot of money, and I could see the frustration growing in him. Saturday morning, I went to First Presbyterian Church for the first time since my mother's funeral. I needed to be there, to feel that connection with her, with the community she loved, with something bigger than all this mess. Reverend Thomas was at the pulpit, and when he saw me, his face lit up with concern and affection. I sat in the pew where my mother and I had sat every Sunday for years. When the choir began singing Amazing Grace, I started crying silently. Sister Louise took my hand and squeezed it, saying nothing, just being present. After the service, Reverend Thomas pulled me aside. "Sister Hannah, how are you holding up?" His gentle hands held mine, those wise eyes studying me with genuine concern. "I'm surviving," I managed to say. "Some days are harder than others." He nodded slowly. "Your mother was a pillar of this church, and we take care of our own. If you need anything at all, my door is always open. And Hannah," he leaned closer, "Dorothy made me promise I'd look after you. She knew difficult times were coming." Those words hit me hard, she knew. She'd told people, prepared a safety net, made sure I wouldn't be alone. I hugged Reverend Thomas right there on the church steps and cried on his shoulder like a child. "She prepared me for this," I whispered. "She knew exactly what he'd do and protected me." The Reverend pulled back and looked at me with that wise smile. "Dorothy Fletcher was one of the smartest women I ever knew. And she raised you to be strong, Hannah. You have it inside you. Trust that." Sunday night, Eli came over while Cameron was out. We sat on the living room floor drinking sweet tea I'd made using my mother's recipe, and I finally told her everything. About the trust, about how my mother had predicted exactly what Cameron would do, about tomorrow's meeting where everything would be revealed. Eli's eyes got wider and wider. "That woman," she said, shaking her head in admiration. "That incredible woman. Hannah, she handed you the victory on a silver platter. She literally defeated Cameron from beyond the grave." "I'm terrified," I confessed. "Tomorrow when he finds out, I don't know how he's going to react." Howard says men like Cameron don't take rejection well, especially when money is involved. Eli grabbed my hands, her bright pink nails contrasting with my pale, trembling hands. "Girl, you listen here. You are not alone in this. I'm going to be right outside that office tomorrow. And if he tries anything, I'm calling the police so fast his head will spin. You understand me?" I nodded, grateful for a friend like her. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, mentally rehearsing how the morning would go. Howard had instructed me to let him do most of the talking, to stay calm no matter what Cameron said or did. "He's going to get angry," Howard had warned. "Probably very angry. But the law is on our side, Hannah. The law and your mother's intelligence." I clutched those words like a lifeline. Monday morning dawned clear and beautiful, that kind of perfect Charleston day that feels cruel when your life is in chaos. I dressed in my mother's navy blue suit, pinned up my hair, put on minimal makeup with trembling hands. I looked at my reflection and tried to see what my mother saw: strength, intelligence, dignity. "You can do this," I whispered to my reflection, "for her. You can do this for her." We drove separately to Howard's office in the historic district. When I arrived, Cameron's lawyer was already there. Richard Barnes, expensive suit, leather briefcase, that kind of aggressive lawyer who charges $500 an hour. He and Cameron were talking in the hallway, laughing like old friends, clearly confident they were about to secure a big payday. Howard greeted me professionally and led me to the conference room. The room had that old Charleston feeling: high ceilings, shuttered windows, an antique wooden conference table. I sat on one side with Howard. Cameron and Richard Barnes sat across from us. The tension was palpable, like static electricity before a storm. Cameron gave me a reassuring smile across the table, thinking we were on the same side, that I was about to hand him his fortune. "Thank you all for coming," Howard began, his voice calm and professional. "We're here today to discuss the dissolution of the marriage between Hannah and Cameron Reed, and to address the division of assets." Before Howard could continue, Richard Barnes interrupted. "Before we begin, I want to make sure we're all on the same page about the marital property in question. My client has documentation showing that Mrs. Brooks' mother passed away recently and left an estate valued at approximately $1,700,000. As this inheritance was received during the marriage, it's subject to South Carolina's marital property laws and should be split equally between both parties. He said this with such confidence, placing a stack of documents on the table as if they were irrefutable evidence. Cameron was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, that satisfied smile on his face. He thought he'd won. He thought the money was already his. Howard nodded calmly, as if hearing something interesting but not particularly surprising. I'm familiar with your position, Murdoch Barnes. However, there are some facts about Mrs. Fletcher's estate that your client seems unaware of. Cameron's expression changed slightly, a wrinkle of confusion appearing. What facts? His voice had an edge now. Howard opened a thick folder and pulled out documents with that deliberate movement of a lawyer who knows exactly what he's doing. Mrs. Dorothy Fletcher, in her wisdom and foresight, established an inheritance protection trust 6 months before her death. Every asset she left to her daughter was placed into this trust with very specific terms. So, Richard Barnes said, leaning forward, trusts can still be considered marital property depending on how they're structured. Howard smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. Not this one. This trust was specifically designed to protect Mrs. Hannah Brooks' inheritance from any claims by her spouse in the event of divorce. It's an irrevocable trust with Mrs. Brooks as the sole beneficiary, according to South Carolina law, and I have the case law right here if you'd like to review it. Assets placed in such a trust prior to knowledge of divorce proceedings are considered separate property and are not subject to division. The silence in the room was absolute. You could hear the tick of the antique clock on the wall, the distant hum of traffic outside. Cameron was staring at Howard, his face going through a series of changes, confusion, disbelief, and then, slowly, a horrible understanding. What are you talking about? His voice came out hoarse. We're married. Half of everything is mine. Howard slid a document across the table. Not in this case, read. This is the trust document. You'll see it was executed 6 months ago, long before you filed for divorce. You'll also see that it explicitly excludes any spousal claims to the assets. Richard Barnes grabbed the document and started speed reading, and I could see his face falling as he comprehended what he was seeing. Cameron stood up so fast his chair almost fell backward. This can't be legal. She can't do this. We're married. His voice was rising now, that careful control he always maintained starting to crack. It's completely legal, Howard said calmly. And I should mention, Mr. Reed, that there's more. Mrs. Fletcher also left a detailed letter explaining her reasons for structuring the trust this way. In it, she expressed concerns about your financial intentions and your treatment of her daughter. While the letter isn't legally binding, it does paint a very clear picture of her state of mind and her wishes. Cameron turned to me, and for a split second, I saw something in his face that genuinely scared me, pure, unfiltered rage, the kind that isn't rational or controllable. You knew about this? You knew the whole time and you let me think that. He stopped himself, realizing what he was admitting. Let you think what, Cameron? I heard my own voice, stronger than I expected, and I stood up too. That you were going to get $1 million? That you could ask for a divorce 2 days after we buried my mother and walk away rich? Is that what you thought? We're married, he shouted, slamming his hands on the table. I have a right to half of everything. Howard stood up now, his presence commanding the room. Actually, Mr. Reed, you have a right to half of the marital assets. The house you live in, which you both own. Your cars. Your joint savings accounts, but Mrs. Brooks' inheritance is not a marital asset. It never was and never will be. He paused, letting that sink in, and Mr. Barnes, I know you're expensive. I know you charge about $500 an hour. So you might want to explain to your client that challenging this trust will cost him tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees, and he will lose. I've been practicing family law for 4 to 2 years, and I've never lost a case involving an inheritance trust. Not once. The law is very clear on this matter. I watched Cameron's face as the reality sank in. He wasn't going to get a penny of my mother's money. All his planning, all his manipulation, waiting to file for divorce until my mother died, it was all for nothing. My mother had won. She'd outsmarted him, protected me, made sure he could never hurt me the way he'd planned. You set me up, Cameron said, his voice full of venom, turning to face me. You and that old... I don't remember deciding to move. I don't remember anything except suddenly being on my feet, and my voice was loud and clear and stronger than it had ever been with him. Don't you dare. Don't you dare disrespect my mother. Not now, not ever. The room went completely silent. Even Cameron seemed shocked by the ferocity in my voice. Get out, I said, my voice trembling but firm. Get your things out of my house and get out of my life. You have 24 hours to move out or I'm calling the police and having you removed. Cameron stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working, his fists clenched. I could see the calculation behind his eyes, the internal war between rage and self-preservation. For one terrible second, I thought he might attack me right there in Howard's office. But then Richard Barnes put a hand on his arm and said quietly, let's go. There's nothing more we can do here. Cameron jerked his arm away, grabbed his briefcase, and stormed out, slamming the door so hard the diplomas on the wall shook. Richard Barnes stayed behind for a moment, looking at the trust documents with grudging respect. That's the most well-structured trust I've ever seen, he finally said to Howard. Whoever set that up knew exactly what they were doing. Howard nodded slightly. Dorothy Fletcher was an extraordinary woman, and she loved her daughter enough to protect her even from beyond the grave. Barnes gathered his papers, nodded to both of us, and left. When the door closed behind him, my legs finally gave out and I collapsed back into the chair. Howard came around the table and placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. You did very well, Hannah. Your mother would be proud. And then the floodgates opened. I cried like I hadn't cried since my mother died, great sobs that shook my entire body, tears that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primitive inside me. But these tears were different. They weren't just sadness or grief. They were relief, they were released anger. They were the beginning of something that felt dangerously close to healing. Howard let me cry, silently offering tissues until I finally calmed down. What happens now? I asked, my voice hoarse. Now we file a response to his divorce petition. We agree to the divorce, but we make it very clear that the only assets being divided are the true marital assets, the house, the cars, the joint accounts. Your inheritance is not up for discussion. He can fight it if he wants, but he'll lose and his lawyer knows that. Howard paused, his face becoming serious. But Hannah, I need to warn you about something. Men like Cameron don't take rejection well, especially when money is involved. You need to be very careful in the coming weeks. His voice carried a weight that made me pay attention. Change the locks on your house today. Document any interaction you have with him. If he tries to make contact, don't respond without me present. And if he shows up at your house or your work, you call the police immediately. Understood? I nodded, a new kind of fear settling in. I'd been so focused on the legal battle that I hadn't fully considered how Cameron might react to losing. Do you think he could hurt me? I asked quietly. Howard sighed. I think a man who asks for divorce 2 days after his mother-in-law's funeral is capable of anything. Better safe than sorry. Those words haunted me as I left his office and drove home alone, knowing that the battle I'd just won might only be the beginning of a much darker war. I called a lie as soon as I left Howard's office, and she screamed so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. He's getting nothing. Nothing at all. Oh my God, Hannah, Miss Dot was a genius. An absolute genius. Her joy was contagious, and I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Can you come to my house? I asked. Howard said I need to change the locks and I don't want to be alone when Cameron comes to get his things. I'm already on my way, she said immediately. And girl, I'm bringing Brother Frank too. That man is huge and he's not going to let Cameron try anything stupid. I got home before Cameron. The house felt different somehow, as if the last 15 years had been just an illusion and now I was finally seeing clearly. I started packing his things methodically, his clothes, his shaving products, his stupid sales trophies that he displayed as if they were medals of honor. Eli arrived with Brother Frank, a huge man from church with a kind heart but intimidating appearance. Where do you want me to be? He asked in his deep voice. Just around, I said. Just in case he tries something. Cameron showed up an hour later, driving way too fast and stopping abruptly in the driveway. He came through the door without knocking and stopped short when he saw Brother Frank standing in the living room. What the hell is he doing here? Cameron demanded. I'm making sure everything goes smoothly, Brother Frank said calmly, crossing his muscular arms. Cameron looked at me with pure hatred. You really think I'd do something? You really think I'm capable of that? Honestly, Cameron, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I don't know who you are anymore. I thought I knew you for 15 years, but the man I saw today, the man who asked for divorce 2 days after we buried my mother, I don't know what that man is capable of. He opened his mouth to respond, but then saw the boxes I'd packed, his things all arranged and waiting. Something in his face crumbled. Your things are here, I said. I need you to take everything today. The locks will be changed tomorrow morning. Cameron looked at the boxes, then back at me, and for one fleeting moment I thought I might see remorse. But then it hardened again. You're going to regret this, Hannah. You and that lawyer think you're so smart, but I know things. About you, about your mother. This isn't over. The veiled threat made my blood run cold, but I kept my voice firm. Get out, Cameron. Take your things and leave. He started grabbing the boxes, banging them around violently, clearly trying to intimidate me. Brother Frank simply stood there, a silent but powerful presence that made it clear any aggression would not be tolerated. After Cameron left, his last box angrily thrown into his trunk, I collapsed on the couch. Eli sat next to me and hugged me tight. You did it, she whispered. You really did it, girl. But I didn't feel victorious. I felt exhausted, empty, like a soldier after a battle that lasted too long. Brother Frank left after checking all the doors and windows, promising to come back the next day to help install new locks. You call if you need anything, he said. The church takes care of family. That night, I called Howard to report that Cameron had gotten his things. Did he make any threats? Howard asked immediately. I told him about Cameron's comment about knowing things, about this not being over. There was a long pause. Hannah, I need you to be very careful. I want you to document that. Write down exactly what he said when he said it, who was present. And if he tries to contact you again, don't respond without letting me know first. The fear in Howard's voice made my stomach tight. Do you think he'll try something? I think a man who thought he was going to get $1 million and ended up with nothing is unpredictable. And unpredictable is dangerous. The next few days were strangely calm. Cameron didn't try to make contact. No calls, no messages, no appearances at my house or school. I started to relax a bit, to believe that maybe he'd accepted defeat and moved on. I should have known better. 3 days after the confrontation in Howard's office, I came home from school in the late afternoon. I'd stayed for a parent-teacher conference, and the sun was starting to set, casting long shadows. When I turned into my driveway, I stopped my car so abruptly the tires squealed. My front door was wide open. I froze in the car, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Everything in me screamed to run, to call the police, not to go in there. But it was my house, not my home. I grabbed my phone with trembling hands and dialed 911. Someone broke into my house. The front door is wide open and I don't know if they're still inside. The operator kept me on the line while she dispatched officers, instructing me to stay in the car where I was safe. I sat there with the doors locked, watching my open door, feeling violated in a way I'd never experienced before. The police arrived in 10 minutes, 2 officers who cautiously entered my house with their hands on their weapons. After what felt like forever, one of them came back out. Ma'am, whoever was here is gone now, but you're going to want to come inside and see this. My stomach dropped. I followed the officer inside, and what I saw made me gasp. My house had been destroyed. The living room looked like a tornado had hit it, couch cushions slashed open with stuffing everywhere, picture frames smashed on the floor with glass scattered across the carpet in the kitchen. Cabinets were hanging open, dishes broken in the sink. And written on my refrigerator in red spray paint was the word, greedy, but the worst was the bedroom. They'd torn through everything, my clothes pulled from the closet and thrown everywhere, my jewelry box empty, but they hadn't taken the jewelry. They'd scattered it across the floor and stomped on it. My mother's pearls, the ones she wore at her wedding, the ones she planned to give me when I got married, were crushed to pieces. And on the mirror above my dresser, written in the same red spray paint, "You'll pay for this." I collapsed on the floor right there, unable to process the violation, the destruction, the pure evil of it all. The officer was talking to me, asking questions, but I couldn't hear anything except the ringing in my ears. Finally his words broke through. "Mom, do you know who might have done this?" I looked at him, tears streaming down my face. "My husband. My soon-to-be ex-husband, Cameron Reed. They took pictures of everything, collected fingerprints, asked questions about Cameron, where he was staying, did he have keys, had he been violent before. I gave them all the information I had, including Howard's number. One of the officers looked at me with genuine concern. "Mom, do you have somewhere else you can stay tonight? I don't think you should be here alone." I called Eli, and she arrived 20 minutes later. When she saw what had been done to my house, to my mother's memory, she almost cried. "That psychopath," she kept saying. "That absolute psychopath." We grabbed some clothes, my laptop, and my mother's letter, the only thing that really mattered. I went to Eli's house that night and lay in her guest room, staring at the ceiling, feeling more violated and vulnerable than I'd ever felt in my life. He'd broken into my home, destroyed my things, crushed my mother's pearls. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The next morning, the police called. They'd found Cameron at his brother's house and arrested him. He was charged with breaking and entering, vandalism, and making terroristic threats. His bond hearing was scheduled for the next day. "Do you want to be there?" The detective asked. "You have the right to make a victim impact statement if you want." I thought about it. Part of me never wanted to see Cameron again, but another part needed to look him in the eyes and let him know he hadn't broken me. "I'll be there," I said. Howard went with me to the bond hearing. We sat in the courtroom and watched as they brought Cameron in wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. He looked terrible, red eyes, unshaven face, smaller somehow. When he saw me, he tried to smile, actually smiled as if we were still friends, as if he hadn't just destroyed my house and threatened my life. The prosecutor presented evidence, photos of my house, copies of the threatening messages, character statements from neighbors who'd seen Cameron's car in my driveway that afternoon. Cameron's lawyer tried to argue that it was just a domestic dispute that got out of hand, that Cameron was under extreme emotional stress because of the divorce, that he wasn't a danger to anyone. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood up, my legs trembling but my voice steady. "Your Honor, I was married to Cameron Reed for 15 years. I loved him. I trusted him. I thought we were building a life together. But 2 days after my mother's funeral, he filed for divorce. And when he found out he wasn't going to get the inheritance he thought he deserved, he showed me who he really is." I looked directly at Cameron. He posted lies about me on social media. He tried to turn everyone against me. And then he broke into my home and destroyed it. He destroyed things that can never be replaced, including jewelry that belonged to my late mother. He spray-painted threats on my walls. He wanted me to be scared. He wanted me to feel violated and unsafe in my own home. I turned back to the judge. But what he doesn't understand is that my mama prepared me for this. She saw through him years ago, and she made sure I'd be protected. And now I see through him too. He's not scary. He's just sad. He's a man who thought he could manipulate and threaten his way to money he never earned and doesn't deserve. The judge listened to me attentively, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished my statement, she turned to Cameron with an expression of pure disgust. "Mr. Reed, I've been on this bench for 20 years and I've seen a lot of bad behavior, but what you did here is particularly cowardly. Breaking into your soon-to-be ex-wife's home and destroying her property because you're angry about a divorce, that's not the behavior of a man. That's the behavior of a child throwing a tantrum." She set his bond at $50,000 and granted a temporary restraining order. Cameron had to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace at all times. As they led Cameron away, he looked back one last time. But this time he wasn't smiling. He was crying, tears streaming down his face as he fully realized what he'd lost and what he'd done. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, no sadness. Just an emptiness where love used to be. Howard placed a gentle hand on my shoulder as we left the courthouse. "You were amazing in there. Strong, dignified, exactly how Dorothy raised you to be." Those words broke something in me, and I started crying right there on the courthouse steps, but these were tears of release, tears of finally being free from the man who had tried to destroy me but had only revealed his own destruction. The next 3 months were a strange mix of legal process and emotional healing. The divorce moved forward, with Cameron eventually agreeing to all our terms after his lawyer made it very clear that fighting the trust would be futile and expensive. We sold the house and split the proceeds equally, about $40,000 each after paying off the mortgage. He kept his car, I kept mine. We divided our small joint savings account. And my inheritance, all that $1,700,000, remained mine and mine alone, exactly as my mother intended. The criminal case was handled separately. Cameron ended up pleading guilty to the vandalism and breaking and entering charges in exchange for probation and having to pay restitution for the damage to my house. Meanwhile, something beautiful started to happen. The community my mother had built over her life rallied around me in ways I never expected. The day after I returned to my vandalized house to start cleaning, I found a crowd of people in my yard. Sister Louise, Brother Frank, Reverend Thomas, even people I barely knew from the neighborhood. "Nobody should have to face this alone," Sister Louise said, pulling me into a tight hug. "You're Dorothy's daughter. And that means you're our daughter too." For 6 hours, these people, my community, my church family, helped me put my house back together. They scrubbed spray paint off the walls and refrigerator. They swept up broken glass. They helped me sort through what could be saved and what had to be thrown away. Sister Louise even brought food because you can't clean on an empty stomach, chicken and rice casserole, homemade biscuits, that pecan pie that was my mother's recipe. Brother Frank fixed my front door that had been damaged in the break-in. By the end of the day, my house looked almost normal again. There were still some paint stains on the walls and some things that could never be replaced, but it was livable. It was home again. During those months, I also started working with a therapist. Reverend Thomas recommended her, a woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, who specialized in relationship trauma and grief. In our sessions, I finally started unpacking everything that had happened, not just the divorce and the vandalism, but years of subtle warning signs I'd ignored, the slow erosion of my self-esteem, the way I'd lost myself trying to make Cameron happy. "You weren't naive, doctor," Chen told me in one session. "You were loving. There's a difference. You loved with your whole heart the way your mother taught you to love. The problem was never you. The problem was always him." Those words freed something inside me. For months I'd been carrying guilt. Guilt for not seeing through Cameron sooner. Guilt for staying so long. Guilt for ignoring my mother's subtle warnings. But Dr. Chen helped me understand that loving fully, trusting completely, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, those weren't weaknesses. Those were strengths. Cameron had exploited those strengths, twisted them, used them against me. But they were still strengths. My capacity to love deeply was a gift from my mother, not a flaw to be ashamed of. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday in January, 4 months after my mother died. Howard and I went to court, but Cameron didn't even show up. His lawyer said he couldn't afford to keep fighting and had agreed to all our terms. When the judge signed the final papers, making our divorce official, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I didn't even know I'd been carrying. "You're free," Howard said with a smile. "How does it feel?" "It feels like I can breathe again," I told him, and it was true. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt like I could take a deep, complete breath. That Sunday, I went to church and felt true joy for the first time in so long. The choir sang Amazing Grace, my mother's favorite song, and I sang along with tears streaming down my face, but they were tears of gratitude, of survival, of hope. After the service, Reverend Thomas called me up to the front. "Church family," he said, "I want us to take a moment to celebrate Sister Hannah. Many of you know she's been through difficult times. But she stayed strong. She stayed in her faith. And she came through the fire refined. Let's give her a hand." The entire church erupted in applause and shouts of amen and yes, Lord. People came up to hug me, to tell me they were proud of me, to welcome me into this next chapter of my life. Sister Louise grabbed my hands and looked me in the eyes. "Your mother is so proud of you right now. You know that, don't you?" I nodded to choked up to speak. After church, I drove to the cemetery where my mother was buried. I sat by her grave and told her everything that had happened. "You were right, Mama," I said. "You were right about everything. And you saved me. You saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves in the trees around me, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I smelled her perfume, that Chanel No. 5 she always wore. "I'm going to be okay," I told her. "I'm going to use this gift you gave me to build something beautiful. I'm going to travel. I'm going to go back to school and get my master's degree like I always wanted. I'm going to live, Mama. Really live just like you told me to." Over the next few months, I started rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I used some of the inheritance to completely renovate my mother's house. I couldn't bring myself to sell it. It was too full of memories, too full of her. So I transformed it into something beautiful, a place where I could stay when I needed to feel close to her. I painted the walls a soft yellow, the shade she'd always loved. I kept her favorite chair in the living room, her reading glasses still on the side table. I planted new magnolias in the garden. It became my sanctuary, my safe place. I also enrolled in the master's program in educational leadership at the College of Charleston, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time or money for. Now I had both. The classes were challenging but energizing, reminding me that I was smart, capable, that I had value beyond being someone's wife. I made new friends in the program, strong, intelligent women who were pursuing their own dreams. I started remembering who I was before Cameron, and discovering who I could become after him. And I started traveling. First, just small trips, a weekend in Savannah, a few days in New Orleans. But then I got braver. I went to Ghana for 2 weeks and traced part of my family's ancestry, visiting Elmina Castle and Cape Coast, connecting with roots that my mother had always wanted to explore but never had the chance. I went to Paris, something Mama had always dreamed of but never realized. I took her picture with me everywhere, took a photo of it in front of the Eiffel Tower, the Mona Lisa at the Louvre. "We're here together, Mama," I whispered. "You may not be here physically, but we're doing this together." Each trip was a declaration of independence, a reclaiming of myself. In Ghana, I stood in the dungeons where my ancestors had been held before being shipped across the Atlantic, and I wept for their suffering but also marveled at their strength, the strength that ran through my mother's veins and now through mine. In Paris, I walked the streets at sunset, ate croissants at sidewalk cafes, visited museums, and felt my mother's spirit with me in every moment. She'd never gotten to do these things, but through me, in some small way, she was experiencing them now. About a year after the divorce was finalized, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I created a scholarship in my mother's name, the Dorothy Fletcher Scholarship Fund. Every year, it would provide financial assistance to a student from our community who wanted to go to college but couldn't afford it, just like my mother had worked multiple jobs to send me to school. I set it up through the church, working with Reverend Thomas to establish the criteria and selection process. The first scholarship ceremony was at First Presbyterian Church. I stood in front of the community that had sustained me through everything and shared my story. Not all of it, some parts were too painful, too personal, but I talked about how my mother had protected me, how she'd seen danger I couldn't see, how she'd used her wisdom and foresight to ensure I'd be taken care of. "My mother taught me that real love protects," I said, looking at the faces of people who had been my anchor. "It doesn't control. It doesn't manipulate. It doesn't come with conditions. It just protects." And when you have that kind of love in your life, when you know someone loved you enough to think about your future even knowing they wouldn't be there to see it, that's everything. That's the kind of love worth living for. There wasn't a dry eye in the church. The first scholarship recipient was an 18-year-old named Jasmine, whose story echoed mine, raised by a single, working mother, dreaming of college but with no way to pay. When I placed the check in her hands, I saw my mother in me, saw the cycle of love and protection continuing. "My mother worked her entire life so I could have opportunities she never had," I told Jasmine. "And now I'm passing that forward to you. Make her proud. Make yourself proud." As I watched Jasmine accept that scholarship, tears of joy and gratitude streaming down her young face, I realized something profound. My mother's legacy wasn't just the money she'd left me. It wasn't even the brilliant way she'd protected me from Cameron's greed. Her legacy was this: the understanding that real love, true love, sacrificial love, echoes forward through generations. It builds and protects and empowers. It sees danger and acts. It thinks beyond itself. That night, I sat in my mother's renovated house, my house now, and felt more at peace than I had in years. The journey had been brutal. I'd lost my mother, discovered my husband's betrayal, been threatened and violated, watched my home destroyed. But I'd also discovered strength I didn't know I had. I'd learned the difference between love that lifts you up and love that tears you down. I'd found out who my real family was, not the man who shared my last name, but the community that showed up with scrub brushes and casseroles and unwavering support. I thought about Cameron sometimes, wondered where he was, what he was doing. I'd heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Atlanta, was working some sales job, trying to rebuild his life. Part of me hoped he'd learned something from what happened, that maybe he'd become a better person. But mostly I didn't think about him at all. He'd taken up too much space in my life for too long. That chapter was closed, sealed, archived. What I thought about instead was the future. The trips I still wanted to take. The degree I was working toward. The students I'd teach. The young people I'd help through my mother's scholarship fund. The life I was building on my own terms. A life of purpose and meaning and freedom. A life my mother would be proud of. A life that honored her sacrifice and her wisdom and her fierce, protective love. 2 years after my mother died, I was finally truly happy. Not the fake happiness I'd had with Cameron, where I was always trying to convince myself everything was fine, but real deep happiness. The kind that comes from knowing yourself, from being free, from living authentically. I'd built a life I was proud of. I had my career that I loved more than ever. I had my education. I'd completed my master's degree in educational leadership with honors. I had my community. I had my independence. And most importantly, I had peace. Sometimes people asked if I'd started dating again, if I was ready to find love. I always smiled and told them the truth. I wasn't looking for it, but I wasn't running from it either. If it came, it would come. And if it didn't, I was perfectly happy on my own. Because that's what my mother's gift really gave me. Not just financial security, though that was part of it, but freedom, the freedom to choose my own path, the freedom to say no to things that didn't serve me. The freedom to wait for real love instead of settling for fake love, the freedom to be happy on my own terms. Dr. Chen and I had talked a lot about this in therapy, about not rushing into another relationship just to fill a void, about taking time to truly heal and rediscover myself, about understanding what I wanted and needed in a partner before even considering letting someone new into my life. You're not broken, she'd told me in one of our last sessions. You were hurt, yes, but you healed. There's a difference. Broken things stay broken. Healed things become stronger at the break point. I like that image. I was healed, not broken. And I was stronger now than I'd ever been. I knew my worth. I knew the warning signs to watch for. I knew that love shouldn't make you feel small or controlled or manipulated. Real love should make you feel seen, valued, free. It should celebrate your strengths, not exploit them. It should build you up, not tear you down. And if I never found that kind of love, I'd be okay. Because I'd learned the most important lesson of all, I could love myself that way. The Dorothy Fletcher Scholarship Fund had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. What started as a single scholarship had expanded to 3, then 5. Other members of the community had started contributing, moved by my mother's story and wanting to help. We'd helped 15 students go to college so far, and every single one of them sent me updates about their progress. Jasmine, the first recipient, was now in her sophomore year studying nursing. She wanted to be like Miss Dot, she said, to help people the way my mother had. I'd also gotten more involved at First Presbyterian. I joined the church council, helped organize community outreach programs, sang in the choir, that same choir my mother had sung in for 30 years. Standing in her spot, singing the songs she'd loved, I felt connected to her in ways that transcended death. Sometimes during Amazing Grace, I'd close my eyes and swear I could hear her voice harmonizing with mine, that rich contralto that had filled our house when I was growing up. My relationship with Ali had deepened too. She'd been there through everything, the darkest days and now the bright ones. We took trips together, had weekly dinners, laughed until we cried about ridiculous things. She was dating someone seriously now, a doctor she'd met at the hospital, and I was genuinely happy for her. You'll find someone too, she'd say sometimes. When you're ready. Maybe I'd say, but if I don't, I'm good. I'm really truly good. I heard through the grapevine that Cameron had indeed moved to Atlanta and gotten remarried quickly, less than a year after our divorce was finalized. Part of me felt sorry for his new wife, wondered if she knew what she was getting into, if she'd see the warning signs I'd missed. But mostly I hoped, for her sake, that maybe he really had changed. That maybe losing everything had taught him something about himself, about what really matters in life. I doubted it, but I hoped. I never tried to contact him, and he never tried to contact me. The restraining order had expired, but the distance between us remained. He was part of my past, a chapter that taught me painful but necessary lessons. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel much of anything toward him. He'd become a cautionary tale I sometimes shared with friends going through their own relationship struggles, a reminder that sometimes the person you love isn't the person they pretend to be, and that's not your fault. On the 3rd anniversary of my mother's death, I went to her grave as I did every year. This time, I brought flowers, magnolias from the garden at her house, and a letter I'd written to her. I sat on the grass beside her headstone, which read Dorothy Fletcher, beloved mother, faithful servant, wise protector, and I read the letter aloud. Dear Mama, it's been 3 years since you left me, and I want you to know I'm okay. Actually, I'm more than okay. I'm thriving. I'm living the life you wanted for me. I'm free. I'm happy. And I'm using everything you gave me, not just the money, but the lessons, the strength, the wisdom, to build something beautiful. You outsmarted Cameron, Mama. You saw through him when I was too blinded by love to see the truth. And you made sure that even from beyond the grave, you could protect me. That's the most powerful act of love I've ever known. I continued, I think about you every single day. I see you in the students I teach. I feel you when I'm making decisions about my life. I hear your voice telling me to hold my head high, to be strong, to never let anyone make me feel small. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for every extra shift you worked. Thank you for every dream you set aside. Thank you for every hard choice you made so I could have better. Thank you for loving me enough to see danger I couldn't see. Thank you for protecting me one last time. I promise I'm making you proud. I promise I'm living, really living, just like you told me to. And I promise that every good thing I do in this world, every person I help, every life I touch, it's all in your honor. The scholarship fund is helping kids who remind me of us, kids with big dreams and hardworking single mothers. I finished my master's degree. I've traveled to places you always dreamed of going. I bought myself a little house near the water where I can watch the sunrise every morning. I'm teaching the way you taught me with my whole heart. I sat there as the sun set, feeling her presence, feeling her love, feeling her pride. And for the first time since she died, I felt complete peace. My mother had given me the greatest gift a parent can give a child. Not money, though that helped tremendously, but wisdom, protection, freedom, and unconditional love that extended beyond the grave. She'd seen the danger coming and built me a fortress. She'd anticipated the betrayal and armed me with the weapons I'd need to survive it. She'd known I'd be strong enough to get through it, even when I didn't know it myself. As I drove home that evening, I thought about everything that had happened over the past 3 years. The crushing grief of losing my mother, the shocking betrayal by Cameron, the violation of having my home destroyed, the slow, painful process of healing, the gradual rebuilding of my life, the discovery of strength I never knew I possessed, the creation of something meaningful from the ashes of everything I'd lost. It hadn't been a straight path from devastation to happiness. There had been setbacks and hard days. Times when I'd wake up and the grief would hit me all over again, fresh and raw. Times when I'd see a couple laughing together and feel a pang of loneliness. Times when I'd wonder if I'd ever trust anyone enough to let them close again. But those moments became less frequent over time, and the good moments, the joyful, peaceful, free moments, became more common. I'd learned that healing wasn't linear. It was messy and complicated, and sometimes you took 2 steps forward and 1 step back. But as long as you kept moving forward, as long as you didn't give up, as long as you held onto hope that things could and would get better, you'd make it through. And on the other side of all that pain and struggle was a version of yourself you never knew existed. A stronger, wiser, freer version. A version your mother would be proud of. That night, I sat on the porch of my little house near the water, watching the stars come out, and I felt grateful. Grateful for my mother and everything she'd taught me. Grateful for the community that had supported me. Grateful for Eli's unwavering friendship. Grateful for Howard Green's legal expertise and fatherly guidance. Grateful even for the hard lessons, because they'd shown me what I was made of. Grateful for the second chance at life, at happiness, at becoming fully myself. I thought about the Hannah who'd married Cameron at 18, young, naive, trusting, eager to please. I thought about the Hannah who'd stayed with him for 15 years, ignoring red flags, making excuses, losing herself bit by bit. I thought about the Hannah who'd cared for her dying mother while her marriage crumbled. And I thought about the Hannah I was now, independent, strong, clear-eyed, free. They were all me, all part of my story. But I liked this version best. This version knew her worth. This version wouldn't settle. This version had learned that sometimes loving yourself means walking away from people who don't love you the way you deserve. The journey from that devastating moment, when Cameron asked for a divorce, to days after my mother's funeral, to this peaceful moment on my porch 3 years later, had been long and hard. But I'd made it. I'd survived. More than survived, I'd thrived. And that was the greatest tribute I could give to my mother's memory. She'd protected me so I could live, really live on my own terms. And that's exactly what I was doing. Now, 3 years later, as I sit here telling this story, I want you to know something. If you're in a relationship where something doesn't feel right, where your partner is more interested in what you can give them than in who you are, where you feel small or controlled or manipulated, trust that feeling. Your gut knows. The people who truly love you can see it. And you deserve more. You deserve real love, not the kind that comes with conditions and calculations. You deserve someone who celebrates you, not someone who diminishes you. You deserve freedom, not control. And if you're already in that dark place where I was, where everything feels hopeless and you don't know how you'll get out, let me tell you this, you will get out. It may not seem possible now. It may feel like the walls are closing in and there's no exit. But there is. There always is. Reach out for help. A therapist, a lawyer, a trusted friend, your church family, anyone who can give you the strength you need when your own is running out. Document everything. Make a plan. And take one step at a time, one day at a time, until you're on the other side. The journey won't be easy. There will be days when you want to give up, days when you doubt yourself, days when you wonder if it's worth it. But it is. You are. Your life, your happiness, your freedom, it's all worth the fight. I won't lie and say everything will be perfect once you get out. There will be scars. There will be hard days. There will be moments when it still hurts. But there will also be joy, there will be freedom, there will be the possibility of building a life that's truly yours. I think about my mother every single day, and I see her wisdom in ways I never could when she was alive. She knew that protecting me wasn't just about leaving me money, it was about giving me the tools to protect myself. The trust fund was important, yes, but so were the lessons she taught me about strength and dignity and self-worth. So were the promises she made me make, to be strong, to stand up for myself, to never let anyone make me feel small. She was preparing me for this battle even when I didn't know it was coming. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see someone my mother would be proud to see. I see someone who survived, who fought, who stood up for herself. I see someone who learned that real love doesn't hurt, doesn't manipulate, doesn't take. Real love gives, protects, liberates. And I see someone who is finally free. I see a woman who knows her worth, who won't settle for less than she deserves, who has built a beautiful life from the ruins of everything she lost. The Dorothy Fletcher Scholarship Fund continues to grow. We've now helped 23 students go to college, 23 young people who remind me of myself and my mother, hardworking, determined, dreaming of something better. Every time I hand a scholarship check to a student, I see my mother's face in theirs. I see her sacrifice, her wisdom, her fierce protective love rippling forward through generations. That's her real legacy. Not the money she left, but the lives she continues to change even now. I eventually did start dating again, about 2.5 years after the divorce. I met someone through a friend, a widower named David who taught history at the College of Charleston. He was kind, patient, emotionally available in ways Cameron never was. He didn't rush me or push me or make me feel like I owed him anything. He celebrated my independence instead of trying to control it. He met my friends and my church family. He understood when I needed space. He made me laugh. And slowly, carefully, I let him in. We've been together for 6 months now, taking things slow, building something real and solid. He knows my whole story. I told him early on because I wanted him to understand why I was cautious, why I needed to move at my own pace. And you know what he said? Thank you for trusting me enough to share that. And thank you to your mother for raising someone so strong. That's when I knew he might be different. That's when I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, real love, the kind my mother had shown me, could exist in a romantic relationship too. But even if it doesn't work out with David, I'll be okay. Because I've learned the most important lesson: I don't need someone else to complete me. I'm already whole. A partner should add to my life, not define it. Should enhance my happiness, not create it. Should walk beside me, not carry me or drag me. And if I never find that, if I spend the rest of my life single and independent, that would be a beautiful life too. Because I have myself and I've learned that's enough. I forgave Cameron eventually. Not for him, but for me. Because carrying anger and bitterness was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. Forgiveness didn't mean what he did was okay. It didn't mean I'd forgotten or that I'd ever let him back into my life. It just meant I was releasing the hold he had on my heart and my peace. He took enough from me. I wasn't going to let him take my joy and my future too. So I forgave him, let it go, and moved forward. Sometimes I drive past the apartment where Cameron and I lived, and it feels like a lifetime ago. Like that was a different Hannah living a different life. And in a way it was. That Hannah didn't know her own strength. That Hannah thought she needed someone else to be whole. That Hannah would have stayed forever, making excuses, losing herself bit by bit. This Hannah knows better. This Hannah knows her worth. This Hannah walks away from anything that doesn't honor her dignity and value. My mother's house, my house now, is filled with light and love. I host dinners there for friends and church family. I've added my own touches while keeping her favorite things, her chair, her garden, her recipes framed in the kitchen. It's become a gathering place, a sanctuary, a reminder that home isn't just where you live but how you live. With openness and authenticity and love. Last month, I was asked to speak at a women's conference at church about surviving betrayal and rebuilding after loss. I was nervous, but I shared my story, the whole story, including the parts that made me look naive and foolish. Because I wanted other women to know that being trusting isn't foolish. Loving completely isn't weakness. Giving someone the benefit of the doubt isn't stupidity. The problem was never that I loved too much. The problem was that he loved too little, and in the wrong ways. After I spoke, dozens of women came up to me. Some were crying. Some shared their own stories of betrayal and survival. Some asked for advice on how to leave, how to start over, how to trust again. And I told them all the same thing: start with one step. One phone call to a lawyer or a therapist. One conversation with a trusted friend. One decision to choose yourself. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to start. If my mother were here today, I know exactly what she'd say. She'd squeeze my hand and say, "I'm proud of you, baby. You did good." And I'd tell her what I wish I could have told her before she died. Thank you, Mama. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't see. Thank you for protecting me when I couldn't protect myself. Thank you for loving me enough to think beyond your own life. Thank you for teaching me that real love protects without controlling, gives without taking, and echoes forward long after we're gone. So if you're reading this or hearing this and you're in that dark place, let me leave you with this: you are stronger than you know. You are worth more than anyone who diminishes you could ever understand. You have the power to change your story, to walk away, to start over. It won't be easy. It will hurt. You will cry and doubt and struggle. But on the other side of all that pain is freedom. And freedom is worth fighting for. If I could get out of that place and find myself again, believe me, you can too. The door is there. You just need to have the courage to turn the handle. And on the other side? On the other side is a life waiting to be lived on your own terms. A life where you're not defined by what someone took from you, but by what you built for yourself. A life where you can finally truly breathe. My mother protected me from beyond the grave, and now I'm living the life she fought so hard to give me. A life of purpose and meaning and freedom. A life where I wake up every day grateful for second chances and wise mothers, and the strength that comes from surviving what you thought would destroy you. A life that honors her memory not by being perfect, but by being authentically, courageously, unapologetically myself. And that's the greatest gift she could have given me. Not the money, not even the legal protection, but the example of what fierce, selfless, visionary love looks like. Love that sees danger and acts. Love that protects without controlling. Love that gives freedom instead of demanding obligation. Love that echoes forward through generations, changing lives it will never see. That's the kind of love my mother gave me. And that's the kind of love I'm learning to give myself and others. That's her legacy, that's her victory, that's her eternal gift to me, and for that, I will be grateful every single day for the rest of my life.